Hello, Plaid Man here. We just got the plaid hat on. I didn't want to do a plaid shirt for some reason. We're still inside, still got Christmas lights, even though it's after Christmas, because I like them. And if it could always smell like Christmas, I would be down, because frankly, I love the smell of the trees and all that other wonderful stuff. Anyhow, on my way home, I was driving and my lady called me. Fortunately, I was available while she's on lunch, so we got to have ended up being a 40-minute chat and, you know, catch up on the day and stuff like that. And interestingly enough, I was telling her about a story idea and this thing came up, which is right and wrong. And we kind of debated back and forth on that concept. And it was very interesting. And afterwards, she had to go because her lunch was over. And I called my good friend Chris and continued the debate for another 40 minutes. Because I thought it was fascinating and I wanted another person to like talk about it. And it was so fascinating that I frankly wanted to talk to you guys about it and share kind of my perspective on it, allow you guys to argue, share your opinions and your thoughts. So effectively what this is about is right and wrong and good and bad. Well, good and bad. Right and wrong, good and bad. I don't know, whatever. Because my simple opinion is there is a right thing. There is a good thing. Now, I would argue that so basically there is total good and there is total bad, but there is also this gradation area. And I apologize if I've already talked about it, but this was like fresh in my head and I really want to talk about it again. And the same thing is with right and wrong. One could argue that they're synonymous with each other. I'm just, whatever. But to me, I think that there is a there is just the right thing. There isn't like, oh, well, that's like not, no, there isn't like a universal truth of a right. And my perspective is like, no, there is a universal truth, universal right. Murdering someone, well, we have a word for it. It's murdering them. Now, that's bad, right? But you could argue that killing someone in certain situations is justified, like is okay, is not bad. And granted, it's good. And there's that argument. That's my opinion. And it was very fascinating to go into kind of the different perspectives on it. One thing I'll say is just like, okay, well, a good an analogy might be like, all right, if I save 10 people, but 3 people die, is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? And it's like, well, the argument would be like, yeah, it's a good thing. Like you saved 10 people, 3 people died. So you really only saved 7 people. But in that instance, it's like, well, is that really the best thing that you could have done? Because frankly, you did, through your actions, 3 people died. But it'd be like getting someone out of a house. Like if you're saving people out of a burning building, right? And 3 people don't get saved, that doesn't make you a bad person. If you did everything you could do and that was the only thing that could be done, and you can always second guess yourself, but like you tried in the moment as a firefighter or as a human being, and you went in and you pulled people out and you saved this many people, but unfortunately 3 people died. That's different. And this is where you get into this gradation scale. But the simplicity of it is to oversimplify, is that is a good thing. Now, my justification, my analysis is good is based on how many people it is affecting positively. Meaning, if what your action is doing is positively affecting more people than it is negatively affecting, then I would argue it is on the good scale. Okay, now, ideally, the more positive you're doing and the less negative you're doing, like it goes like this, so good, bad, the more positive you're doing and the less negative, the better the thing is. And ultimately, where it's just positively helping people and there's no downside, that is ultimate good, ideal scene. That's what you want to strive for. The other analogy, and this is going to make me sound fatphobic, is getting into health. Sorry, my throat's acting up. Getting into like health. And you look at someone like, let's say even myself. I'm a good example where it's just like, I'm overweight, okay? I mean, I look like it, but I am overweight. So I could look at the things that I consume or do, whether it be like alcohol, cigarettes, or having pizza, or this or that, or not exercising, or yada, 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 and be like, oh, well, I'm a bad person because my actions are leading my body to be less ideal, basically overweight, right? And it's like, well, okay, that doesn't make me inherently a bad person. It means that my choices are negatively impacting my health, which negatively impacts my mental and spiritual self. It affects my family. It affects my wife. It affects the people I work with. Now, that isn't to say that I can be good in all those things. Like, my wife loves me, and you know, my family could love me, and my boss and my coworkers could love me, and all these things. But the argument would be, if I was in better shape and had better health choices and this, perhaps they would love me more. I would be better at work. I would be a better lover, a better husband, a better friend if I wasn't making these bad choices. And so there you get into this like thing. So if someone were to look at me and be like, oh, your health is not good, I could see their perspective, right? It's not like, one could argue it's subjective, but in all honesty, it's objective. Objectively, like, just based on science and facts and data, objectively, I'm not in good, my body is not as healthy as it could be or should be, frankly. So that's a me thing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm the worst thing ever and I'm a sloven and whatever. You know, punish. That's not what that means. It just means, like, you need to be honest with yourself and the perspective. And it's interesting because we got into like weight and other things, and I keep hammering home that, like, there is a good, right? And again, here's another thing, and this is where you go from, like, where you kind of split the line between you're a person who's making a choice, like saving 10 people, and unfortunately 3 people died, and a villain, where it's like, oh, I'm going to kill 3 people, but 7 people will survive. And it's like, oh, okay. But, like, same situation. It's like, I'm going to set a fire, but I know 7 people will survive and 3 will die. And it's like, you just murdered 3 people. And here's the difference that I have. Here is how I square the circle. Because that argument is, like, the ends justify the means. Meaning, whatever bad thing I do, right, as long as more people are positively impacted, then it'll be great, right? And time again, we've run into this argument in movies. Thanos is a terrific example. He's like, I'm going to kill 50% of all living things, but that will effectively save resources for the other 50% to live a better, fuller, longer life, right? And he's wrong, because simply put, it's just like, well, the logic behind it might be sound in that to save 50 people, I have to kill 50 people, which is just horrible math anyways. But the other problem is like, that only works if every other option is off the table. That only works then. That only works in a situation with Titanic, right? Where we only have enough boats for, I think it was, whatever, less than half the crew. It was like a third of the people on the boat. So we have to pick and choose, and basically women and children first. We have to have a couple crewmen on the boats, but outside of that, it's women and children first. And you'd be like, well, what about the men? But it's just like, as horrible of a decision as it is, the best decision, given the resources at hand, is women and children first. There was no other option if you're in that situation. And then in that argument, it's like, no, that's a good choice. That's a good choice. Like, it's not a great choice. It's not the best choice ever. But considering the resources, whoever the person is, the captain, whoever made that choice, considering the resources he had at his disposal at that time, you know, but I will make this caveat. They locked the poor people. I don't know if you saw the movie, but spoiler alert, 30 years later, they locked the poor people downstairs. So it's like, okay, if they didn't do that and it was just rich, poor, it doesn't really matter, crew members, like, If you're a woman or a child, you get on the escape boats, period. If you're a man and there's other stuff, then we'll draw lots or something like that. Then it's like, that is ultimate good, because given the opportunity, given all the resources at your disposal, you made the choice that positively affected more people than it negatively impacted, right? And that to me is good. And that's where I think we could all learn from, in that that's what your choices should be, and on a daily basis. And it doesn't mean to beat yourself up if you choose wrong. Like my friend was pointing out, I was like, yeah, but we went bowling the other day and like we had a beer and we ate like crappy food. Does that mean I'm bad? And if I'm bad, does that mean like every other decision I do is bad? And he was being silly and tongue in cheek. And these things do not live in like a vacuum. They don't necessarily directly like infect every other thing. Like if you did one bad thing, it doesn't mean you're going to constantly do bad things, right? A bad example of this would be like if somebody murdered someone, right? Well, they lived their whole life, and it doesn't mean that everything that they did in their life leading up to that point was bad, full bad. That's not what that means. It means that they made decisions, and I guarantee if you look back at their life, you'll be like, oh, here's some good things, here's some great things, here's some wonderful things, and then here's some also horrible things, and then they made this decision. Now they made that decision, and one could argue that later on down the road, they're going to have all these other decisions, but frankly, in the case of like murdering, that's kind of problematic, because it's such a toxic thing, and it's such a break from good and bad. Like there's no, like you can't square that circle. Then now this person's infected with this thing. You cannot trust them to do more good things than bad things. They can't be on this scale over here doing more and more good, because they've done this horrible thing, which kind of locks them here. So unless they unanchor this bad thing by making amends to society and specifically the people they injured, until they actually truly make amends for this thing, and I'm not talking about time in jail, because that's a whole other thing, but no, I mean make amends financially, spiritually, you know, to the point where those impacted are like, I mean, I still don't like that you killed my friend, but like, okay, I feel like I can trust you now to some extent, right? Allow you to be in society. Then they're stuck in this point, you know, where it's like, you did this, so there's only so much good. Like somebody could murder someone and then cure cancer, and it's like, but you murdered someone. So like, thanks for the cure for cancer. That does not equal out this. You still need to make amends for this. And that's what gets into this problem, where you get villains who are like, the ends justify the means. The ends justify the means. And it's like, no, they don't really, actually, because you are making the choice to negatively impact all these other people. And because you're making that choice, like all these people are being harmed. And it doesn't matter how many good you did this horrible thing. Like, oh, hey, if I kill 10 people, but I give 1 million people, you know, $1 billion, which is weird. But anyways, you know, positively impact 1 million people's lives to kill one person. It's like, but you killed one person. Like that doesn't square. Like, sorry, that circle doesn't square. Like this doesn't work. So it's an interesting thing. And I love that my wife contested my perspective on it, because again, I was coming up with like a story idea, and I said like, oh, and you know, something right. And she's like, well, right isn't like an objective truth. Right is subjective. It's like, well, hey, I did something and it's right, versus I did something and it's wrong. And my argument is that no, right is objective. Right is objective. Just kind of like, without getting too much into it, science, like flat earth theory, where it's just like, okay, and here, on you with this. If somebody has an argument, right, and they're like, oh, this is my opinion about something, right? And you're like, okay, cool. Well, I have data, facts, science, unequivocal facts about that contest this argument that you have, right? Then, and the person is just like, well, but I still have this viewpoint because I have these other things and I just think you're a conspiracy theorist or whatever. Then it's like, this person who's doing this, you can't really have an argument with them because they're not playing the same game. They're not playing the same thing that you're doing. They are like, I believe I am right because I believe, and that's just all I need. And it's like, good, your subjective reality can be true for you. It doesn't have to be true for the rest of us, but it can be true for you. And you're entitled to that perspective as long as that viewpoint doesn't negatively impact us. Like people believing in flat earth theory, it's like, okay, fine, I don't really care. But if it starts becoming like detrimental to the health and safety of the rest of us, non-flat earth believers, then that becomes a problem. Now you're dangerous to the rest of us. So then that's kind of an interesting thing. It's just like, yeah, no, sorry. I think that there's objectively, you're in good health. Objectively, there's objective right. There's objective wrong. There's objective truth. There's objective falsity, lying, what have you. Like these things are true. There's no skating around it. And I challenge you like to, if you're curious or you're like, think about it yourself and try and come up with a situation and really look at the data and figure out like, oh yeah, no, there's only one right thing. Now it could be, frankly, it could be, and I just thought of another instance, like there could be a religion that's like, it is okay to kill people who are not of our religion. And that's how certain people interpret it, or that's what the text says or whatever. And it's just like, well, I'm sorry, but that's not correct. Because universally, it is what positively affects people more than it negatively affects. And then it's on a gradient scale. So if you're helping 10 people and harming one person, that's okay, but it's not great. So if you can not harm that one person and help 10 people, that's your scale. That's what you're trying to do. Is in life, you are trying to do more good by positively affecting yourself, those around you, yada, 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 and doing less and less and less bad or evil or not good, right? And that's your scale. That's what we're striving to. And you'll see people that don't do that, where it's like they do an occasional good thing and then it's always bad. You need to avoid those people and you need to watch out for them because they're toxic, they're sneaky, and they will infest your life. And that's kind of an interesting thing to look at. Reversely, it's like, okay, if somebody does one really bad thing, you don't need to forgive them, but you should also look at it from a certain perspective and like, good, so they did this one bad thing. How are they as a normal person? Like, if you just look at their life as this one thing, that doesn't make everything about them bad. They still need to make amends for that thing, and maybe they need to fix that thing. I personally have several things in my life that I'm like, are there. And I know they anchor me to a certain spot, and it really doesn't matter. I've tried to like, oh, well, I'll be good and better and better and better. And it's like, no, you still have these things that you need to fix. So until these things get fixed and handled and you know, basically dispelled, until you pull up that anchor and you dry it out and it's done, you're still kind of stuck there. There's only so, like you're no amount of good outdoes these bad things you do. You actually have to go back and handle them. Anyways, that was a very long ramble about things and stuff. And this has been Plaid Man. It's almost a new year. I'm going to make a couple videos probably tomorrow and Saturday, just about things that are coming up in my head and so on and so forth. But I wanted to do this instead of like a normal movie ramble because it was on my mind. And anyhow, I love you all. Talk to you all soon.